hopefully it's actually going to work this time. For some reason, my Facebook live streaming hasn't worked the last 3 times I've podcasted. So that's always wonderful.
Is it integrated with Zoom?
No, it's integrated. Sweet. I think we're actually working this time. It's actually integrated with a product called Restream. Yeah.
Oh.
Sweet. We're actually live. It's actually working. Woo! That was frustrating. Like the last 2 podcasts, it just wouldn't stream. So I went through the whole show. I went and checked my Facebook feed. I'm like, it's not running. So anyways, thank you so much for joining. Really excited to have you here. You're just right in Denver, right?
Yes.
Which part of Mile High City?
We down in Parker.
Yeah, love Parker. I used to do door-to-door sales in Parker, in like the wooded area of Parker. And the only place I've gotten a gun pulled on me while doing door-to-door sales. So
must have been South Parker. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those mixed neighborhoods. But I'm grateful for the time. And as a way to get started, please brag about yourself. Give us a 60-second background of what led you to where you're at in your career today.
Well, hopefully this is a PG podcast, because really what's led me to everything is I get shit done. Like that is who I am.
You forgot to pump your fist up when you said that.
Yeah. And it took me a while to discover it. So I've actually done all sorts of different career fields. I mean, I've caught bad guys as a loss prevention agent. I've been a barista. I've been a legal secretary. I used to make TV commercials. I've been in a lot of industries, and it took a long time for me to figure out what I enjoyed doing. And finally, I realized I'm really good at getting shit done. And guess what? There's a whole career field for that. It's called project management. So I went into project management. I loved it. I mean, people say, what do you do for fun? Oh, I blog about project management. I speak about project management. I just do project management. And so it was really the career field for me. And so 6 years ago, I went out and started my own project management consulting company. And so that was kind of bringing together multiple dreams into this product or this service of project management consulting.
Talk about the bad guy thing. I'm piqued my curiosity. How were you catching bad guys?
Yeah, well, I started as
and women, bad guys and women. We're not sexist when it comes to catching criminals.
No, bad people. No, I started as a loss prevention agent at Banana Republic down in Texas. So it was a lot of organized crime, actually. Well, it's considered organized crime because
Banana Republic's organized crime.
No, shoplifters are organized.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So they would literally come in and they would sweep off a whole table of clothes in a bag and leave. I mean, they could get $3,000 worth of merchandise in 10 seconds. It's pretty phenomenal. And so I catch shoplifters down there, and then decided that was a lot like fishing, where you kind of sit around and you have to just wait and wait and wait, and hopefully someone comes along to take something. And so I moved into Target doing both internal and external investigations, meaning shoplifters and employees. And I found the investigating employees much more interesting because it was more like a treasure hunt, where you would see something wrong, and so you'd watch the cameras or you'd follow the receipts, and you would figure out what they were doing. So yeah, I did that for a few years, but wasn't a long-term fit for me.
So what is project management? I think it could mean a lot of different things. What is actually project management? How do you have a career in project management?
Well, the book term of project management, it's an activity that has a definite start and a definite end and a defined scope. You build a house, that's a project. You have a wedding, that's a project. You put on a conference, that's a project. So anything that is discrete work and not kind of operational, where you do it every day, like accounts payable or something is an everyday type of thing, it's a project. And so there are tons of people in project management. There's construction project managers, there's business project managers, et cetera. I focus on IT project management. And so we help companies when they want to be able to put in complicated systems, making sure that as they implement it into their company, it works the way they expect it to work. And so my job really is to organize everybody. It's an official, my official job is, I like to think of it like a conductor of an orchestra, right? The conductor's there making sure that the musicians are doing, keeping the tempo, making sure things are happening on time, making sure the right instruments are coming in at the right moments so that you have this beautiful piece of music in the end. And that's really what project management is. It's looking to see, all right, what pieces do we need to come together when, and keeping everybody on track, and then facilitating problem solving and discussions so that decisions can be made, and you can get whatever it is you need to get done.
And you've even taken that a step further and applied these principles of project management to like your personal life, me as an individual entity, not just as a business, which I think a lot of people apply it as like a business as a whole, but you've taken it a step further. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, when I first discovered project management, I was in my MBA, and I had to take a production management course, which is like, think of like supply chain, right? Things moving down, building cars, things like that. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to take this. And so I'm reading the course catalog, and I'm looking for the least of all evils, and I come across project management. And what it ended up being was a course on how to use MS Project, which is a scheduling tool. Oh my goodness, I loved it. I was like, where can I use project to plan my life? And so my ex-husband now, my husband at the time, was having to do remodel on the house. And so I'm like, we're going to put this all in project and plan it out. And then, eventually I learned about Agile. And so I started, anytime we were actually doing another remodel in another house. So I had this, all right, not started, in progress and done columns on a board, so he knew like which thing to work on at what time, and it's just a really good way to help everybody stay focused on what you're trying to achieve. I have a friend, an ex-coworker, who actually does daily stand-ups with the people who live in her house, because she has roommates and stuff. So they get up and talk about every day, what did they do yesterday, what are they doing today, and what roadblocks do they have to get it done, so that it's just really clear what the expectations are and what everybody's doing. But further to that, though, I did write a book called Becoming You, which I like to call it Project Management for Your Life. And what that was really about is the journey I kind of went through, which is a lot of self-reflection and understanding what were my strengths, what were my weaknesses, and then how do you, take what you love, take what you're good at, and then make money at it, right? That Venn diagram, what is the intersection of those things? And then put a vision for yourself and create a plan to reach that vision. And so that's what, it was all about, is like project management is getting from where you are to where you want to be, and what are all the steps that it takes to get there.
And why do so many people fail or have roadblocks personally or from a business perspective with project management or organizing their life and their plans? Like, I'm gonna accomplish XYZ by end of September, and it doesn't happen. What are some of the roadblocks that you typically see there?
Yeah. I think the number one is probably prioritization. So have you made that a priority? So you say you're going to accomplish it, but have you made sure that you've cleared the way for you to be able to accomplish that? People are always like, oh, I don't have time to get this done. And really, we all have enough time. It's just a matter of how we prioritize our time. So I'm always saying how frustrated I am that I'm not in shape, but I don't ever say I don't have time. It's not that, I'm a busy person, but my problem is I haven't prioritized it. So if I'm going to make a goal that I want to, like, say, lose 20 pounds by, end of September, then I need to make it a priority and then understand what are the steps that are going to take me from where I am to that goal. And then really it's scheduling it out, right? And blocking that time. So if there is something I want to achieve, I block my calendar and I protect that time. And yeah, not everything goes to plan. And sometimes you have to make tweaks, but at least you're starting with a definite steps of how to get there. And so then course correcting is easier than, just meandering and seeing where you end up.
And I think people end up calendaring like meetings and certain markers, but they don't calendar like schedule the time for planning or here's my 15-minute window for doing this, and then my next 15-minute window and chunk like that. And the other thing that happens a lot, I think, is people give themselves a certain amount of time and then they're going to take up all that time when they can do it in half the amount of time.
Yes. And that's kind of when we do when I'm leading a project at a company, I definitely don't communicate if I've built in Slack into the schedule, like extra time. I communicate, this is the schedule. Then I know in the back of my mind, oh, well, if we need to, we have some contingency time in the background, because you're exactly right. We will expand to whatever time we have. Little kids are the same way. If you're like, hey, your room needs to be cleaned within an hour, it's going to take probably that whole hour to clean their room. In fact, they'll probably do most of it in the last 10 minutes of that hour. So yes, we usually do.
I am that kid. Yeah,
Yeah.
I still am.
So you're right. It's important to build a realistic estimate and then hold yourself to it, and not just put arbitrary time on the calendar if there's something you want to achieve. Like, make it real and drive yourself to that goal. The other thing I noticed, and I know not everybody is like this, but I also noticed that if I have too much time or I'm not busy enough, I actually achieve less. And it's like there's almost a sense of motivation about having a lot to do, because then I waste less time. If I have multiple projects going on, and I'm having to drive my team to help them achieve things, and I've got these things going on in my personal life, I like to live on the border of being just a little stressed, not like unhealthy stress, but like a motivational stress of, I have to be organized so I get all this done. Because if I've got these huge blocks of time on my calendar, then I'm kind of like, oh, well, I guess that can wait till tomorrow, because I have nothing to do tomorrow either. And I become far less productive. But I know that's not everybody, but that's how I like to work.
Yeah, I definitely notice that too. If I have a big 2-hour chunk on my calendar, all of a sudden it's like, well, first off, you're going to take up that entire amount of time on something that you could maybe get 3 or 4 things done, but you didn't schedule yourself out enough. And I think that's tough to do. And how do you recommend people do that? Is it actually just having a calendar on your phone? Like, not everyone has Outlook, especially now with people who are furloughed and laid off. Like, how do they keep busy?
Well, one is to have goals, right? So, and then every day. So I guess I'll answer it in two ways. Back when I worked at Target, we had a development action plan, and I always had to be working towards getting better at something. And so what I would do is I would actually look and say, what am I going to do tomorrow to get better at this thing? And I would write it out every single day. What am I going to do tomorrow to get better? And that really helped me keep a focus on it. Then later in life, and this part's in my book, what I did was actually build a calendar. Again, I would start at the beginning of the week, and I would look at my whole week, and I just built it on Excel. So I didn't need Outlook. I didn't need any of that. On Excel, I had this little worksheet where I said, blocked out time. This is when I'm going to work on my book, and this is when I'm going to blog, and this is when I'm going to do this. And it didn't always go according to schedule, but since I laid it out, I got a lot more achieved than if I hadn't. And then the best practice is then to look at the next day and look at your schedule the next day and make sure
the day
that
before, the day prior.
Yeah.
Look, not like just roll into your day and
exactly. Don't just wake up in the morning and let the day dictate you. You need to dictate the day. That helps a lot.
Yeah, it's a fine balance, and I think people may hear that too. And a lot of I know my generation for sure, and our generation is like, too busy is bad, and like, just if you're too busy, you're stressed out. But I'm kind of like you too. So I wonder if it's more of a personality thing of being busy, you know?
I think there's a balance though, because I found if I overscheduled myself, like if I had every block filled on my calendar, then it became unmotivating as well. So I do think it's figuring out what is your balance of busyness that helps you stay motivated and doesn't let you become complacent. And it's probably a little different for everybody because people do need time to just have headspace, right? And decompress. Or, one of the things a lot of thought leaders talk about is this idea of just being able to have time to where you're not busy actually doing something, so you can just have time to think. And so sometimes I will like just lay in bed or lay on the couch and not have my phone and not have the TV on and just let my mind wander where it wants to wander. But because that's where creativity, I think, comes from. If we're always working and always producing, then we don't have space to be creative.
And
but
are you actually blocking time for that, for those moments? Like, do you put those in?
I don't have to, because it's kind of part of my routine, but you totally could. You could totally just say, this is my unscheduled time and I'm just going to let it go where it goes. But for me, I spend every morning when I wake up, I just lay in bed for half an hour without doing anything.
Yeah. And I say the yin and yang too, because I always found myself when I was scheduling and was trying to get so much done, I was getting less done.
Yes.
And when I actually started removing stuff from my calendar and scheduling more time for taking a step back, taking a walk, and actually really thinking creatively and giving much more space for that, I was 2, 3, 4, or 5 times more productive. And these are things that I've just been working and processing the last few months even.
Exactly. I think a too full calendar can lead to a lack of creativity, and then a too empty calendar leads to complacency and wasted time. And I don't think it's a hard and fast rule with everybody. I think you've kind of got to experiment with it and see what's the right thing for you. But I think the other thing that's really important is not to have too many priorities, right? Because we can only focus on so many things at once or have so many priorities, and kind of best practices, or what are your top 3 priorities, and then those are the only priorities you have. A lot of reasons why projects fail in companies is because the company is like, we have to get this done, this done, this done, this done, and they try to do it all at the same time, rather than saying, I'm going to do this project, get it done, and then move on to the next project. They try to do 5 projects at once.
And we think we're being effective that way too.
Right. Because they're all important. Yeah. And so we're going to work on them all. And guess what? It takes 3 times as long to get it done. Versus if I just put all my energy in maybe 2 projects, they would get done much faster, and I would actually get more projects done in the amount of time that I have.
Absolutely. What are some other ways that business owners, entrepreneurs, and professionals, how can they make the most of their 9 to 5? I know it's something we've kind of talked about a little bit.
Well, yeah, I really think a lot of it is about prioritization, right? We kind of it goes back to what I said before, don't let the day dictate you, but you dictate the day. When you don't go into the day with some sort of plan, it doesn't have to be a scripted 9 to 5, so to speak, but you need to have a plan for the day. Otherwise you'll just get carried away. And so entrepreneurs, and business owners and some, a lot of people have this thing where everything's a fire. And so they're just constantly responding. And yes, there are fires we have to respond to, but we need to make sure that we have a clear understanding of what the priorities were for the day, and then evaluate any fires that come up against those priorities, because sometimes fires are perceived fires and not real fires. So somebody's created this sense of urgency around something and they dump it on your lap. And the question is it really that important, or is
they're
that
projecting
really
that urgency? And then it kind of like,
and then you get anxious. Yeah. You're like, oh my goodness, this must be important.
Well, what about as an employee? How do you manage that if your boss is the one who's imposing that? How do you navigate that?
I actually have a whole
Sensitive
speech on that.
territory.
It takes an hour. It's an hour speech, but a lot of it is around asking really good questions. Because sometimes even if your boss asks you for something, we don't do a great job of asking questions. So for instance, if my boss says, hey, I need this report done. Well, it could be, well, how detailed does it really need to be? Like, so you need to ask, what are you going to use the report for? Right. So that you can just understand how, like, if it's for the CEO, then it's going to have one level of attention and detail and professionalism versus if the manager just wants to get an idea of something, maybe it's a quick write-up, right? So you got to understand what's the objective. And then a lot of times what we fail to ask is, when is this due? When would you like this? Because sometimes we feel, because it's our boss or our boss's boss asking, we feel like, oh my goodness, it has to be done now. And so we don't stop to say, how urgent is this? Right? We make an assumption. And then the final thing we fail to do is say, hey, just so you're aware, I have XYZ on my plate. Does this take priority over it? And if it does, then, it's your boss. They're paying you. So, you need to do things in their priority order. But sometimes your boss doesn't realize what's on your plate. And so I think where we really break down is that conversation, and we just make assumptions. And so then we have this fake sense of urgency on ourselves.
Yeah. And I know with my team too, I'll come up, I'm working on a new project on the side. They're doing their thing, and I'll come to them and say, hey, I got this. Can we get this done? And I think that's a really great point, is asking those deeper questions. When, how detailed, how important, hey, can you understand that? Like, these are some of the things that I have right now. And I think that's a really great point. Great tip.
Yeah. It's really bad if it's like your boss's boss. I don't know. I used to get like, if they're like, they say, hey, I need this, like all of a sudden my heart would start racing. And, and so that immediately puts you in this fight or flight mode, right?
Yeah. And also being combative. I think people are afraid to come across as they're being combative, or they're afraid their boss is going to perceive them as combative, when in fact, actually a manager or boss or whatever probably would appreciate a question. And if they wouldn't, then you probably don't want to work for that person anyways.
Right. Well, and I had a conversation with somebody the other day, slightly different. It wasn't about getting stuff done, but same type of back and forth, where you can have that conversation, but remove the emotion from it. Because that's what a manager doesn't want, is like, oh, they don't want to be like, oh, I'm so stressed out, or, oh, this is so terrible. Like, because then that's not really solving the problem. But if you're coming with them with facts, a manager is going to, if they're good, they're going to at least hear you out and help you make that decision. But if you're coming to them all emotional, it's just not going, you're not going to get to the root of what you're trying to say, because it's shrouded in the emotion.
Absolutely. Any other key tips, tricks, or strategies that you would recommend for anybody listening?
I'm a firm believer that it's always good to have goals in your life. It's too easy this day and age where we have Netflix at our fingertips, and whatever activities, gaming, streaming, all sorts of things, that we can become complacent and quit growing. And it doesn't mean that you always have to be busy and always have to be achieving something. But I think there's an element of, we should always be moving forward at least a little bit, right? There's times where we move forward a lot, and there's times where we need a breather, but we should still be moving forward a little. And so I think it's important for every individual to have some sort of goal in their life, whether it's personal, professional, that they're becoming a better person every day.
Yeah, I've always found myself my most depressed, distraught, and distracted when I'm not pursuing my goals or setting goals even, and just taking action. It's kind of that feedback loop of you're, kind of depressed because you don't have goals, and you're not getting anything done because you don't have goals. But also you have to take action. Like, having goals in itself is one thing, right, but then actually taking the baby steps, even if it's one thing extra that you can do that day, it starts compounding on itself eventually.
Always move forward no matter how slowly. But you know, what's interesting what you said though, is I think there was even a study done where they found that older people are deteriorate more quickly if they don't have something to live for anymore. Right. And it doesn't have to be a spouse or a kids or whatever. It's just something that gets you up every day. And so I think that's important, because you're right. You just fall into depression or complacency or whatever. And then it I think impacts you physically, mentally, and spiritually.
Yeah, 100%. Well, listen, this has been a really great conversation, and I very much appreciate you sharing and mentoring us. And with that as well, how can people find you, follow you, find your book, and get in contact with you?
Yeah, the book's is on Amazon.com, and it's called Becoming You. And you can check us out on projectgenetics.com or find me on LinkedIn, Jana Axline.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jana. And we'll get all the links together. So for those of you that are listening and watching live, we'll get the links dropped in there. Really appreciate you. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening or on all your favorite podcast platforms. Leave a review. We'll see you guys next time.